You won't find many places where in one day you can see a beautiful sunrise, walk in the footsteps of Blackbeard the pirate, and explore one of the few remaining maritime forests in North Carolina. Founded in 1961 as a park for African Americans, Hammocks Beach State Park now encompasses nearly 1,600 acres of mostly undeveloped coastal land. Bear, Huggins, and Jones Islands make up a majority of the park. On Huggins Island, you'll find a maritime forest with giant oak trees that provide habitat for other plant species to survive and thrive. This forest also strengthens the shoreline and protects against erosion and the destructive effects of salt spray. But rising sea levels could destroy this fragile ecosystem, says former Park Superintendent Sam Bland.
The impacts of sea level rise all along our coast typically measured just in millimeters per year, but even just such small rises will mean that areas that didn't flood as much flood more often.
And that could spell trouble for maritime forests and barrier islands.
No islands are going to be exempt from sea level rise. Because of the high dunes, they will last longer, but eventually over time, as the sea level does continue to rise, it will continue to chew away and eat away.
This erosion happens faster when large storms blow through. When Hurricane Fran made landfall on the southeast North Carolina coast in 1996, it caused much destruction. Buffeted by high winds, a 10-foot storm surge sent saltwater onto Bear Island, as seen in this video shot and narrated by Bland the day after the hurricane.
Overwash area, at least 300 yards or more from the ocean side. All the leaves ripped off the trees.
The Category 3 storm also battered park headquarters in Swansboro, wrecking piers and damaging other structures. 2 decades later, sand carried by ocean tides is rebuilding dunes on the barrier islands as they continue their natural landward migration.
This dune face, you can see a real good example of the dynamics created by storms and the wave action that comes up onto the beach and scours out these dunes.
Barrier islands are the first line of defense when hurricanes strike the North Carolina coast. But with climate change spawning more intense storms, scientists predict rising seas will begin to submerge barrier islands. This satellite photo shows how Huggins Island in Hammocks Beach State Park looks now. But by 2050, the Environmental Protection Agency predicts sea levels could rise 2 feet. And by the end of the century, a 4-foot sea level rise would put part of the island underwater. If barrier islands get swamped, coastal communities would lose an important buffer from the effects of wind and waves. But natural barriers can protect these islands from erosion, says marine scientist Pete Peterson.
Here, Mother Nature gives us this marsh, and this marsh can live through massive hurricanes. It's resistant in the first place, so it doesn't change very readily. Should it change, should patches be eroded or covered by some of this moving sand that makes it from the ocean side over the barrier and into the marsh, it's resilient because it has the capacity to bounce back again.
Instead of preserving marshes, some property owners near the park build hardened structures like bulkheads to try to keep the sea at bay. Coastal scientist Lexia Weaver says these methods cause even more damage.
A bulkhead is a seawall, so basically it's a hard surface. So what happens is when the waves come in and hit that bulkhead, that wave energy has nowhere to go. So what happens is it ends up scouring out. It takes out all of the valuable habitat that was once growing in front of the bulkhead.
Weaver says one solution is to create natural barriers like oyster reefs to slow the energy of tides and waves. In turn, reefs create an ecological niche for salt marshes that provide habitat for plants and animals, like here at Jones Island at the mouth of the White Oak River.
Behind me is a living shoreline that is almost 10 years old, And when we first started working here, the area behind me was completely barren. It was all just a sandy beach where marsh grass used to once grow, where oysters used to once grow. So this is an example of an oyster cluster that can be found on oyster shellbag sills or on native and restored oyster reefs. And on this, just this small cluster, there's about 10 or so oysters. So you can imagine if you had a bunch of these clusters that as the waves come in, they help to slow down the wave energy but not hold that wave energy back. So the water kind of flows through the oyster reef and the wave energy is reduced, and that's what helps to prevent erosion.
By preventing erosion from sea level rise and storms, these natural barriers may be the park's best defense to keep the islands intact in the years to come.